Good morning. Before we start, I'd like to remind everybody that the overall title of our program is FICS Chat General Practices in Thesis Writing. In other words, our discussions shall not be too focused on details and specifics. It is your job to discuss these specifics when you consult with your thesis advisors. Here in this program, we shall look at general issues and concerns. For example, our topic today deals with the general issues of writing the introductory chapter of your thesis. Oh, by the way, I'd like to point out something here. We don't know, we at the FICS Chat, we don't know how this started. But we concede, by convention perhaps, theses are normally written with chapters. For example, in here, writing the introductory chapter, this is chapter 1 titled Introduction. And you know, chapter 1 is always titled Introduction. In general, the thesis outline would look like this. Many authors and experts insist that you need some interesting ways to begin presenting your research problem in chapter 1. You may already know this, but let's have a look at them again. First, describe the historical developments in the subject matter that convinced you that this study was actually needed. Through this discussion, you try to convince your reader that the developments in the field are enough reason to be convinced that there is need to do the research as you propose. You may use a mix of research syntheses and experiences to substantiate your arguments, but always try to develop a strong argument in favor of your study. Second, it is in this chapter where you discuss and justify your assumptions that led to this study. Why were you convinced that this study was needed? Your arguments must be strong and evidence-based. Third, it is in this portion of your thesis where you should describe, though briefly, how you intend to conduct this study. At this point, if there's any need for you, or if there's any need for it, you must further clarify exactly how you'll proceed to conduct your research. Be brief and to the point. Where are your data going to come from? How are you going to collect your data? How are you going to analyze your data? And things like that. Now, let's have a closer look at the research problem. In most theses, there would be a major section in chapter 1 titled Statement of the Problem. Most books on how to write the thesis would discuss this point in chapter 1. The question now is, what is the research problem and what is it about? A research problem, says one of the best experts in social science research, Professor Fred Kerlinger, in his book published in 1973, is a statement that should express a relation between two or more variables. In other words, a research problem asks what relation exists between two or more variables that are being studied. What could be a practical advantage of presenting your research problem early on, as early as chapter 1? Well, for one, your thesis advisor must know sooner or soonest what your research problem is and how you intend to work on the topic, so that he or she will be able to help you and give you sound advice. Next, in the introductory chapter, you begin presenting your research problem. And you do this by presenting experiences and research observations pointing to the direction of your study. This is really describing the historical developments in the field. After you have presented your research problem, there would be an implied question, which asks, what is so important about the current situation in the field that you need to do research and understand it better? After you have presented your research problem, there would be an implied question, which asks, what is so important about the current situation in the field that you need to research and better understand it? I said that twice in order to emphasize the important point that requires. Many authors of books and other publications about how to write a research report today agree that a significant consideration in the preparation of the introductory chapter of your thesis must be the immediate discussion of your research problem. According to many authors and experts, we need some interesting ways to begin presenting our research problem. You may already know these, but let's have a look at them again. First, demonstrate your full understanding of the facts and ideas about the field to be studied. How do you do this? In the field where you want to undertake your study in, would you be able to correctly interpret behavior of community residents wanting to express themselves in issues concerning potential policies? Your knowledge of the pronouncements of the community leadership, familiarity with issues, and your basic understanding of the behavior of community residents would show in the manner that you would express the kind of research that you would want to do in the field. Second, use your natural curiosity to determine which specific area to do the study in. This approach is usually useful when you have a full grasp of the developments in the field. Like, keep abreast of what's going on in the field and what people are talking about or doing. Keep abreast of the developments in technology and how they are being used by people. Now, so you can clearly see the entirety of chapter 1, let's have a look at it. Here's the details for chapter 1. The side heads, these are the major topics, would include background of the study, statement of the research problem, research objectives, hypotheses to be tested if you have any hypotheses, significance of the study, limitations of the study, and your definition of terminologies. Definition of terms, by the way, is referring to your own definition of the terms as they are used in your study. not in anybody else's presentation. In our upcoming episode number 3, we shall talk about how to review the related literature. But before we are done for the day, I have something for you. We've been talking about the concept of research problem in the last so many minutes. Is it possible that this is an expression of our uncertainties regarding this concept? Do you think we can call it differently? Another term maybe, such as research questions. This phraseology means we are looking for answers rather than problems. Just think about it. For our next episode, we shall be talking about how to review the literature. Now, this is far more exciting. Join us next week for this, and until then, thank you for company this morning. Okay, friends, we are going to respond to some questions that were sent. And so we picked up some questions that to us sounded interesting, and we would like to respond to them. This is what I can say. Most of the questions you sent or asked were questions about something that you were not sure you wanted to ask. Okay? I'd like to be candid about this with everybody. There are questions raised that are not answerable. There are questions raised that do not need to be answered. And there are questions raised that I think you already know what answer there is. Okay? And we have been able to detect those ones. I'm not going to respond to all questions. I'm going to respond to questions that I believe would result in useful information. Okay, now, that said, I have this particular observation, this question. This is an interesting one. If we are aiming for international refereed journal, is it true that we should avoid using the local context? Where did you hear that? You're far more advanced than we are here in this program. Why? Because you're not talking of publishing an article in an international journal. We are just talking about doing thesis. Magkalayo po yun. But here's the thing. If you are thinking of trying to publish an article in an international journal, we're going to talk about that later on, because there are a lot of things everybody should know about that. But trying to do thesis is a different thing. Now, the issue of local content, this is also a topic that was discussed in today's episode of our program. In fact, one of the errors of reviewing the literature is this: avoiding some researchers or reviewers of literature avoid research reports coming from the developing world. That is too unfortunate and very short-sighted, because more and more significant research reports are coming from the developing world. They are becoming more important And traditionally, research reported from the third world have not been cited. Researchers, Western publishers, always focus on research reported from the developed countries. And that is why you do not see literature coming from developing countries frequently. Because journals published in the West are biased towards articles coming from authors in the developed countries. Kung titingnan ninyo halos lahat ng mga articles galing sa Western countries. Bihira yun ang gagaling sa developing countries. In Asia, for example, Africa. In Asia, there are increasing number of publications, let's say, from India, because there are more publications coming out of India. That is what is happening. But in countries in Africa, for instance, where there are no publishers, you don't have any publications from the continent. And that's so unfair. And so it is a mistake to focus on research reports coming from the developing countries. It's a more significant mistake to avoid them, not providing local context as it is said here. It's not a question of simply providing local context. It's an issue of providing the right context and the right point of view. Because Western researchers are finding it now that interpreting things from the developing world is much more difficult than they used to believe. So, if you want a good interpretation of research results coming from the developing world, look at how scientists from the developing world interpret them. Okay? We are going to respond to other questions. I'm sure we will get more questions, but okay? Until then, see you next time.